How important can an envelope be if it doesn't arrive through the mail? This time, I received a notice that wasn't in my mailbox, it was taped directly to my front door. Bright white, thick, official looking, like some highly important notice that the HOA itself had carefully delivered to me. The kind of envelope that makes your heart race before you even read what's inside. No smile, no friendly greeting, no hello, just bold red letters stamped across the front. Final notice. Just those two words, they felt massive to me. What could possibly be inside? Why would the HOA send something like this? My heart was racing, just like yours would be. But before we go any further, I have a small request. If you enjoy stories like this, please subscribe to the channel so we can keep meeting like this. And let me know in the comments, has something like this ever happened to you? Now, let's start the story. Here's what happened. At first, I assumed it had to be a mistake. Maybe a neighbor complaint, maybe just a warning. Then my eyes landed on one number, and that number shook me. $300,000. No one can stay standing after reading that, so I had to sit down. The document claimed that I had been committing ongoing violations for years. Unapproved fencing, improper driveway materials, poor lawn maintenance, landscaping that didn't follow HOA rules, and more. All of those penalties combined had now turned into a final notice. Past years' fines, everything included. I read it again and again, hoping the amount might somehow change. Normally, I read notices without my glasses, but this time I put them on carefully, just in case my eyes were making a mistake. They weren't. The number refused to change. Every single time I read it, it was still $300,000. And that's when my real story begins.
My name is Michael Turner, and before any of this happened, before lawyers, fines, and that envelope, I lived a quiet life in Meadow Ridge Estates, on the older side of the neighborhood, the part that existed long before manicured sidewalks, HOA signs, and rule books posted at every corner. I moved there years before the community became what people see today, back when the streets were narrower, the lots were larger, and neighbors didn't feel entitled to control how others lived. I wasn't loud, I wasn't difficult, and I wasn't rebellious. I simply kept to myself, worked long hours, came home late, fixed my own property, and avoided unnecessary drama. I never attended HOA meetings, never joined committees, and most importantly, never signed HOA paperwork because my land had been in my family long before the association ever existed. For a long time, that didn't seem to matter until a new neighbor moved in 2 houses down. A woman named Linda Walker, someone who believed Meadow Ridge should look a very specific way and that everyone else was obligated to follow the same rules she lived by. At first, it was subtle. Looks at my fence, comments about my driveway, passive-aggressive smiles as she walked past my yard. But soon, the handwritten notes started appearing, criticizing my lawn, my fence, my landscaping, always referencing community standards. I ignored them, thinking they would stop. But ignoring Linda only made things worse, because Linda wasn't just a neighbor, she was deeply connected to the HOA board, attending every meeting, volunteering for committees, and knowing exactly how to push the right buttons behind closed doors. Complaints were filed, photos were taken, and reports were submitted without my knowledge, all while I received no official warnings, no mailed notices, no direct communication, until one day, a bright white, thick, official-looking envelope appeared taped to my front door with bold red letters stamped across it. Final notice. Inside was a demand for hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines, claiming years of violations, unapproved fencing, improper driveway materials, landscaping issues, and retroactive penalties, along with threats of liens and foreclosure if payment wasn't made. It wasn't random, and it wasn't a mistake. It was personal. And Linda wanted me gone. What she didn't know, and what the HOA didn't know either, was that after the first few notes appeared, something felt wrong to me. So I installed CCTV cameras around my property, not secretly, more illegally, but openly for my own protection, covering my driveway, front gate, and side yard. I wasn't trying to catch anyone. I just wanted proof in case things escalated, and escalate they did. Over time, the cameras recorded far more than I expected. Late-night visits, people stopping near my fence, photos being taken, and documents being dropped off and picked up near my door. By the time that final notice appeared, I already knew something bigger was happening, that I wasn't just being fined, I was being targeted by a neighbor using the HOA as a weapon. While they believed they were building a case against me, I was unknowingly building one of my own, and the evidence was already there, waiting to be revealed. Something that would change everything once it was finally brought into the light. By the time the final notice was taped to my door, fear was no longer my primary emotion. Clarity was, because I understood that this was no longer about rules or community standards, it was about power. And power only works when people are too afraid to push back. Instead of panicking, I documented everything, pulling emails, handwritten notes, dates, timelines, and then I went straight to the CCTV footage, reviewing weeks and then months of recordings, which confirmed every suspicion I had ever had about Linda Walker and her involvement.
The cameras showed her standing near my fence, taking photos from angles designed to exaggerate issues, pointing at parts of my yard while talking on her phone. But the most critical footage came from a quiet afternoon when Linda walked directly up to my front door, not to knock, not to speak, but to tape the final notice to it herself, completely alone, without an HOA officer, without witnesses, and outside official hours. That single moment changed everything because it proved the notice wasn't officially served, it was planted, and that meant the fines weren't just aggressive, they were procedurally flawed. I didn't confront Linda, and I didn't confront the HOA. Instead, I contacted a real estate attorney who specialized in HOA disputes, not someone friendly with HOAs. And when I showed him the footage, he paused the screen and told me plainly that this was my leverage. Together, we built a careful strategy, starting with formal written requests to the HOA for violation records, proof of delivery, and documentation showing that I had ever agreed to HOA authority, and each time they failed to produce what was required. Then came the evidence, delivered legally and professionally, screenshots, timestamps, and a letter explaining that the final notice violated their own bylaws and that Linda Walker's actions constituted harassment, trespassing, and misrepresentation of authority. The letter warned that continued enforcement would expose the HOA to counterclaims, and suddenly the silence set in, followed days later by a call that sounded nothing like the confident threats I'd heard before. The HOA wanted to resolve the misunderstanding, but instead of mediation, we demanded a formal hearing where the footage was played frame by frame, and Linda denied everything until timestamps appeared and the room went quiet. The board members didn't look angry, they looked nervous because they realized that enforcing the fines would expose them, not protect them. Within a week, the HOA issued written confirmation that all fines were withdrawn, all violations dismissed, and my account balance reduced to zero, with no apology and no admission, but none was needed because the lien never happened, the foreclosure threat vanished, and Linda resigned from every HOA committee shortly after before eventually moving away. I stayed, not out of pride or victory, but because this was never about revenge. It was about understanding how easily authority survives when no one questions it. That envelope was meant to scare me into compliance, but instead it exposed the cracks in a system built on assumptions and silence, proving that documentation, patience, and proof can shift power when nothing else can, and that sometimes the only way to escape a trap is to expose the truth holding it together.